Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Chapter 12, dealing with microorganisms. So far, we have been dealing with prokaryotes, and this is the fourth part in dealing with prokaryotes. We first dealt with the archaea, the extreme bacteria. Now we are dealing with regular bacteria. Last time we talked about how bacteria reproduce. This time we're going to talk about some of the roles of bacteria in our world, whether they are beneficial, good, harmful, or whether they are not really either of the above. And some of them, it just kind of depends on what you want to happen at that time. Okay, first off, we are going to be talking about what are called nitrogen-fixing bacteria. That does not mean that the nitrogen was broken. To fix it means that you put it into a usable form. So you have bacteria that live in those little lumpy things that you see. They are nodules that live on the roots of legumes. Legumes are certain groups of plants, things like peas and peanuts, bluebonnet flowers. These are all legumes. And what they do is they actually convert the nitrogen from the atmosphere, which is useless to pretty much all living things, and they convert it into a form that plants can use, and then they put it into the soil. This really is the only way we get our nitrogen, is from eating the plants and the things that eat them, and we need it both for building muscle as well as for making DNA in our body. So it is definitely important that these bacteria do this. There are not really many ways that nitrogen gets into the soil like that, so that the plants can absorb it and grow. Okay, secondly is decomposition. You see the beautiful tomato as it is beginning to rot. And the picture up above is actually bacteria that you'd find in the soil that would be consuming all of these things that are dead and dying. Okay, now decomposition, depending on the situation, you'd probably like it and not like it. You'd probably not like it if, you wanted to eat the tomato and the tomato was there rotting. However, in the grand scheme of things, it's a pretty good thing that bacteria do this, because otherwise, anytime anything died, whether plant or animal or anything else, it would just kind of sit there and not go away. So I, for one, am at least glad that most of the time decomposition happens, because I don't really want to see that stuff laying around. Okay, next, an industrial use in waste treatment. And yes, that is what you think it is. That is what is technically called sludge, also known as sewage. Pee and poo mixed in with a variety of other things. In dealing with waste treatment, and you can see the septic tank diagram in the upper left, bacteria are used to break down anything organic like poo, as well as any plant matter or anything else that might be in there. That is why if you have a septic system, you're supposed to put something like Rid-X into it. And Rid-X is just bacteria that are in a hibernation state. When they enter the water, they kind of wake up and start eating. And they keep the septic tank from being overfilled with feces. Okay, so that is a definite important trait. It's kind of like decomposition, but not of bodies. Now, a relatively new technological use is called bioremediation. And this is where bacteria actually is able to eat things that are toxic, as well as things that generally are not able to decompose. They will be able to eat, say, at an oil spill. The bacteria will eat the organic parts of the oil and break it down, and the waste that the bacteria gives off is totally harmless to the environment. It's things like water, carbon dioxide, things like that. The picture you see on the left is something that's new, and that is actually there is now a bacteria that is able to break down by eating plastic. That right there is a microscopic image of bacteria eating a plastic bag. Animated, but the real thing happens too. Okay, so bioremediation, basically fixing things by letting the bacteria eat them. So that way we don't have sludge from oil spills and mounds of plastic. They're starting to use bacteria to break them down. Now, there's an area that bacteria have been used in for millennia, thousands and thousands of years, that you might not be aware of, and that is making food. All of the products that you see here, as well as many others, anything that is fermented and some things that are aged, are done using different cultures of bacteria. So things like pepperoni and yogurt, sauerkraut, cheese, pickles, olives, anything like that requires a bacterial culture. In fact, one of the interesting things is when you're having yogurt, the bacteria is still alive. If you read the container, it will say a live culture of L. acidophilus. That's the name of the bacteria. It helps you be healthy, which is what we're going to talk about next. In all the other foods, however, the bacteria is simply used in the process of making it. However, you are never alone, in that you have all kinds of bacteria that live in you and on you in order to keep you healthy. You have bacteria that help break down your food so that you can absorb more of the nutrients. They live in your intestine. You have bacteria that will monitor the bad bacteria and the good bacteria in you, and they will actually fight and kill the bad bacteria. There are bacteria that produce vitamin K, and they've recently been realizing that the bacteria in your intestines are actually related to your emotional state. They aren't quite sure how, but they've realized that somehow they are, that it actually is linked to depression and anxiety and things like that if the levels of bacteria in your intestines are off, which is kind of unusual to think about. But the mechanisms as to how that works are still pretty much guesses. Now, there may have been a question that you've had as you've been living in Florida. I didn't have this question living in New York, and that is, what is that pink slime? If you have noticed in your shower or your toilet, around the sink, drain especially, you end up with this pink. You'll be glad to know that it is completely harmless, and what it actually is it is an airborne bacteria. So it is not mold, it is a bacterial colony that is completely harmless. Okay, so you can decide if that's good, bad, or neutral. If you like pink, maybe you'd like it around. It grows where it is humid, and that is the toilet, the shower, and around your sink. Now, unfortunately, bacteria also can be pathogens, or they can cause diseases. This is a list of some of the examples of some very common types. Tooth decay is caused by a type of strep, which is the same family that causes strep throat. Lyme disease is caused by bacteria, a pretty intense one. You need to have antibiotics for a while. Tetanus is nasty if you get it. Make sure you have your tetanus vaccinations up to date. And if you ever step on something that is kind of old and nasty and it goes in deep, make sure you get your tetanus booster. Tetanus is a bacteria that lives deep in tissues only, but it causes all your muscles to start constricting, and you'll end up in all kinds of pain. Tuberculosis, sometimes you might hear it as TB. It causes a lot of fluid to build up in the lungs. Salmonella is food poisoning that happens from eggs and chicken, and you actually can get it from handling reptiles as well, or birds. You can have strep pneumonia, which is still very bad, and cholera, which fortunately is not very common in the United States, that tends to be transferred through sewage. So lots of times if you have problems where a hurricane or tornado's gone through and there's no fresh water, that's why they get concerned, is because eventually the sewage and things from people trying to exist ends up contaminating drinking water, and people get really, really sick. Okay, hopefully this has enlightened you as to some of the things that bacteria do in your life, and we'll talk next time.